Look around the Santa Clarita Valley today and you see a number of colleges and shopping malls and all sorts of traffic, all the accoutrements of a modern 21st century cosmopolitan suburb. But turn back the clock to the first couple of decades of the last century. Of course, it didn't always used to be that way. This was a desert area with only a couple of thousand people who in many ways laid the groundwork for the things that were to come. I'm Leon Warden, and this is Legacy, Santa Clarita's Living History, brought to you by the Santa Clarita Valley Historical Society and SCV-TV. Today's guests remember a little something about particularly Sand Canyon, which is still a rural community, but used to be even more rural. And I think we have Gene and MaryLou Ruddell to tell us all about it. Welcome to the show.
What do you want me to tell you?
Well, I want you to tell me when you, what your first, well, first I think we better explain why we have a rock sitting on the table.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? For all the wonderful things that have happened in the Santa Clarita Valley over the decades,
yeah.
Of course, 1928, March 12th, St. Francis Dam collapsed. Mm-hmm. Second worst disaster in California history, America's worst civil engineering failure of the 20th century. And you remember a little bit something about that.
Yes, I do.
Tell me about what you remember.
The first thing I can remember is my father worked at a hydro plant for the Southern California Edison, and he was thinking about going to work for the city of Los Angeles, which owned a hydro plant in San Francisquito Canyon. And I can remember him going up there. I can remember him coming home at night at dinner time, and he's telling my mother, "We're not moving up to that powerhouse." He says, "That dam," I don't know if that's what word he used, "that dam's going to break." He said, "I saw muddy water running out from the bottom of it." And sure enough, it was shortly after that, the dam failed. Mm-hmm. And then the only thing I could, because I was only probably 5 or 6 years old, I can remember driving up there. And I remember drove across the creek about 3 dozen times to get there. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that I can remember is that, you know, the big boulders laying at the bottom, but along the side walls of the canyon, they were just scraped clean from the water going by, you know.
I guess it's 13 billion gallons of water, so that would...
it made a pretty good flood. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, and like you say, it was one of the biggest disasters in California history, other than what, San Francisco quake?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quake and fire.
I think, some 400 and some people, I think.
450 or more people probably died in the St. Francis Dam. All the way from, of course, from Saugus, you know, up San Francisquito Canyon down out to the ocean, because, you know, people, I mean, most people probably died up in our end of it, because some people downstream had warning, and that's what I want you to tell me about.
Well, what I heard about the warning was at that time, because we lived at a hydro plant, the Edison company had their own private telephone lines. They didn't depend on somebody else. And of course, they were the crank phones. In fact, I have one at the house yet at home. But the main operator in, I forget where it was, the substation or operator in Los Angeles area someplace, he noticed that the phone line had gone out from #1 powerhouse in San Francisquito Canyon. Mm-hmm. He had no idea why. And then he noticed that the substation out here at Saugus, wherever it is here, they lost the phone line there. Mm-hmm. And wherever the power line from the Sierra Nevadas, from Big Creek and Kernville comes through, you know, that power line went out. Mm-hmm. He put 3 and 3 together, or 2 and 2 together, and decided the dam had broke. That's when he apparently, or somebody then, called Santa Paula and Fillmore to let them know that the flood's coming. That's the reason the police were, and phone calls, well, they phoned people up in those days too, on the old phones, and saved a lot of those people. And then the rest of my story on that is, they called them a heavy crew. They'd been over at the powerhouse where we lived in Azusa doing some work on construction on the power plant. And they had gone from our place, and they were camped over here, just the other side of where the old loading docks were for the cattle at Newhall Ranch. When the old railroad went there, they were camped right in there. And they got washed away. Yeah, I think the one of the guys, heavy crew there, one of the guys, I think his name was Johnson, but I can't remember. I wasn't that old to remember that much. So
your
anyway,
father was working at Azusa at the time.
he was working at the hydro plant in Azusa, yeah. But he was pretty familiar with other hydro plants, because what he did also, in those days, you had to have a man on duty in the powerhouse at all times to keep the cycles right, the timing and the voltage and everything correct. And my father went around to different hydro plants to automate them, so you didn't have to have a man on duty all the time. Somebody had to be around there, but they didn't have to be watching all the time.
Right.
So that's what he had been doing. This is part of the rock from
That's a piece
concrete.
Piece of the dam.
Piece of the dam.
Yeah, and of course, funny thing about that, I don't know if you can see it, but there's big boulders in these, with the, and they, that was supposedly part of the reason for. There were a lot of reasons for the failure, but part of the reason for, they were just scooping up big rocks and everything out of the river and throwing it into the concrete and expecting it to hold. So it was pretty bizarre.
Yeah, it doesn't look like of the highest quality, does it?
Not really. But there were Edison crews, I know, that all up and down the canyon and out to out by the LA Ventura County line, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think that actually at the time, right, basically in the weeks before the dam break, they were actually stringing some lines.
Oh, really?
Yeah, stringing some communication lines, and I know you had dam workers up at you had Edison workers up at the dam, and then down a little farther, and of course you had a camp crew of 150 right at the line, and 70, some of them died because the water hit the mountain and washed back on them. So did your dad know other people who died in
I don't
disaster?
think so. No, don't think so.
Yeah. Now, if this was 1928, you say you were 5 years old, born in 1923.
Right.
You came out here then, how soon after the dam break?
Shortly afterwards.
Like a couple days, couple weeks?
No, I would say within a few weeks. Yeah.
Was there a big, line of gawkers, when you got out there?
Nobody else around.
No.
No.
You remember seeing that big monument then that was still standing up there?
Oh, yeah.
The big piece of the dam that they
The city
dynamited the following
the
year.
city didn't like that.
Yeah. Now, but you lived in Azusa at the time. So, MaryLou, what was your first experience with the Santa Clarita Valley?
July the 1st, probably June, probably the first part of June of 1951.
That sounds like
The first part of June.
a wedding.
No, it was not a wedding.
No,
It wasn't a wedding.
Let me tell the story.
Okay. Please do.
Jobs at that time after the war were hard to get. Right. And I had a friend that worked for the county agriculture department, and a man by Mr. Crocker, who owned Lincoln Savings and Loan, was looking for a ranch manager. He had recommended me, and I had to go out and meet with Mr. and Mrs. Crocker, and they didn't hire me until they wanted a married man. I was single. So I had to go find a wife. So I went back home, and this girl was...
They didn't have Russian brides that you could just call up or on the internet then.
I knew of this girl driving down the street. I knew who she was. I knew her parents better than I knew. And so I saw her, and I stopped her on the street, and I asked her if she wanted to get married. On top of that, then I had to take her out here to meet Mr. and Mrs. Crocker so she would pass the test if it was going to be. So I brought her out here on a Sunday, I think it was. Yeah. And she passed the test, so then we got married.
Passed the test, okay. I want to hear it your way. Why'd you say yes to this guy?
Oh. Well.
Don't remember?
No, why did you say yes? Well, the opportunity of my life.
Okay.
I said yes because of I felt it was going to be the opportunity of my life.
Now, you both were living in Azusa still
It was a very small town. Yeah, it was small enough so we knew I mean, although I'm a little bit younger than he is, I knew of them. You know, it wasn't like you didn't know anything about any of them. You know, you knew the family background.
Well,
and
at that
whatever.
time...
In fact, the first time I saw him, I was babysitting for his good friend.
Okay.
I was a babysitter.
But
There
no,
wasn't a chance encounter. You knew each other.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
well, in that town, at that
It's not like
time...
you're driving down the street and there's a can.
yeah. But in those days, like in a small town, you knew most everybody.
Yeah.
If you didn't know them, you knew who they were, you know.
Well, and you never did, you were such that if you did anything wrong, it got back to your parents before you got home.
Mm-hmm.
It was that small a town.
So,
And
Now,
people
you
were that.
behaved yourself.
But the other thing is that we had, in passing this test that we had for the employment, we had rules that we had to go by.
Okay.
We were there on Saturdays and Sundays because that's when they came out. We had to,
I had a milk cow that I
Yeah.
had to have fresh milk, and she
Yeah.
had to make fresh butter for them.
and clean the house and didn't get water on the windows and, I mean, just all sorts of, you know, no laundry on the line. And I'll
yeah.
tell you that rules never hurt anybody.
So we,
So you came out here in 51?
51, and we're still in the same house. Never
Which
moved.
is, I don't know if you can see it in this behind us here, but the house is there.
it's
But
under-
all this area, we're looking at Sand Canyon, and Sand Canyon Road is on the right.
Right here.
And so Soledad Canyon runs up across the
the
top
freeway
there.
goes right through here now.
And all this area here then was the Crocker Ranch.
Yes, it went from the railroad track here, so there was about 300 acres here that we ran cattle on.
Okay.
Our house, you can't see it here because it's under this oak tree. This house here on the hill is where they stayed on the weekends.
Okay.
Our house was built in 1947, so
Yeah,
it's
they
still there.
purchased the house. They purchased the ranch in 1947 and rebuilt the house, replaced the house that was there for an employee.
100 years, the turn of the old man Walker
Frank
lived
Walker,
in, not Frank,
Father, Papa.
Papa, what was his name?
Oh, we'll
George.
think of it.
Yeah.
Papa, he originally settled here at the turn of the century. 'Cause he told me that once. And the house, when I had one picture of it, it wasn't much of a house. It had dirt floors. And he told me he got drought out of there. That's when he moved up to Placerita Canyon because there was water up there. And that's where he raised the family. It was in Placerita Canyon.
The year we came, there'd been 3 years of drought.
Yeah,
No,
it
it didn't have
have any.
water. And the operation of the ranch was that you only had as many cows as you could raise the hay for.
Okay.
And one of the first things that Gene did do was to put in irrigated pasture.
Yeah, I put this
so this was
irrigated pasture in.
irrigated pasture.
Okay.
And then you dry farmed the rest of them. Whatever you see there that looks kind of dry, that was in oats in the wintertime. And then after you bale the hay, you pastured the rest of it off with the cows.
Right. And you were telling me that there are grapes up there on Soledad.
This is grapes. Yeah.
Soledad and
That's
Sand
all
Canyon.
grapes.
And what is this area today now?
This
Dean
up here,
Uh-huh.
that's what they call Dean Homes.
Dean
That's all subdivision divided. And here's the In-N-Out hamburger place and Denny's and Standard Station. And here's Vaughn's parking lot, Vaughn's and the shopping center here. And this is all
Pine
this is
trees
all
up-
houses over here. This is Pine Tree area.
Pine Tree up off of there.
That area. That's all houses. Yeah.
Okay. And so you ran cattle on. Who were some of your neighbors? I mean, neighbors were probably pretty far away, but who were some of the other people who lived there in the early 50s?
Well, the Bellows lived up Iron Canyon.
Bellows were good friends.
Remember a guy named Ace Kane?
Well, he came later.
He came later.
Yeah.
You laugh.
And,
Why do you laugh?
Well, when Crockers first were looking for property in the area, looking for property, the ranch at the end of the canyon, what was it called?
Oh, and it's called the Sable Ranch now.
Yeah,
but
it was we called it the Sable Ranch. It had been for sale, and they didn't go for that piece, and they bought this piece. And then when Ace Kane came in, the Sable Ranch was still for sale. And if he had decided to, instead of forcing his operation right along Sand Canyon Road, and he could have bought the Sable Ranch and nobody would have cared. You had to drive in a 4/4 of a mile before you even got there, so you didn't see anything, and he could have done whatever he wanted to.
And what was he doing out there?
Well, that was only hearsay. He brought his reputation with him from Hollywood, is what it was.
Of course, he was an actor. I mean, you know, the story is that he ran a bordello and gambling place and all that kind of stuff.
That reputation came with him. So, not that anything like
Plus
that
the
ever happened there.
Plus the Cherokee also came
Well,
with it.
the people that were around him, you know what Cherokee is?
Was it cough syrup with
Cough syrup
codeine?
with codeine.
Okay.
I can remember cleaning up along Sand Canyon Road when I'd go out and pick up cans and bottles. There was always these, they were almost quart bottles of Cherokee thrown out along the road. So that was the clientele that
It
he
didn't
had.
exactly mix too well, I suppose, with the Crocker mandated lifestyle.
No, and then he was able to get a liquor license.
Oh, yeah?
You know, and I probably shouldn't say that, but it was, he got the license by political influence of somebody that was a local person here who was on the Board of Equalization.
Okay, name starts with B.
I wasn't going to say anything like that. I was going to say it might have had something to do with water.
Yeah. Okay. So Bill Bonelli notwithstanding, let's move on. You were in the 1950s then. You're still a young couple. What did you do for fun?
Work.
We didn't. No, that was
We
300.
had fun.
Yeah,
The fun was right there.
365 days is what you worked when you were a farmer.
We did have a swimming pool.
Yeah, there was a pool. We did have a.
Where'd you go shopping?
Most all the time, I when Panorama City, the Panorama Market at the corner of Devonshire and Sepulveda opened. That was where we'd go shopping.
What did you drive at the time to get there?
50.
We still had a 58.
Station
50.
wagon.
Might have been the station wagon.
Station
Ford.
wagon.
Now, did you raise kids here?
Yeah.
Where'd they go to school?
Sulphur Springs.
I don't know, how many are there?
Three. Went to Sulphur Springs, went to Hart, went to Placerita, went to Sierra Vista, and graduated from Canyon.
3 boys?
No, 2 boys and a girl.
2 boys and a girl. And from your hat, you were in the Navy.
Yes, I was in the Navy for a little while.
Tell me what an LCI is.
LCI stands for Landing Craft Infantry. And when you see them in the old movies, when they land in Normandy or in the Pacific Island, they have just ramps that go on the outside. We could carry a company of Marines, which is 160, I think, in those days. We just put them on the beach, and then we left as quick as we could, leave them there and fight.
And your dad was in World War I?
My father was on a subchaser in World War I, yeah.
And then at least one of your sons also went in the military.
Charlie, our youngest son, became an naval officer in the Navy. Yeah. He's our ranch manager now.
Really?
We have a farm in Oregon.
I was going to get to that. Tell me what you're farming today.
Well, I'll tell you the truth, and you'll have to believe me. You've heard of Ocean Spray, so along with Ocean Spray, we raise cranberries. We have about 50 acres of cranberry bogs on the South Oregon coast. There's about the only place that, well, there is a few in the state of Washington, a few cranberries there, but cranberries can only be grown in limited areas. They have to have an acid soil, and they can't have too hot a weather, and they don't, so kind of limited. So we've been growing cranberries for quite a while. That's where we have to leave in a few days. Our son told us to be there Monday to start harvest, so.
Go back to it. I saw a picture of you waist high in cranberries.
Yeah.
So you get right in there, huh?
Yeah, well, also we feed our employees, so they
She's
get
our
lunch.
cook also.
They get lunch.
So
and then also the gopher.
How'd you get from cattle to cranberries?
Oh, because of the family.
My father in World War II
War One.
or World War I, rather. They got $21 a month salary, same as I did when I went in the Navy. But they were promised a bonus for overseas time, which they never received until the mid-30s, during the dirty 30s, when President Roosevelt was there. I don't know if some historic nuts would remember, and it was quite a news thing at the time, was the veterans actually marched on Washington to demand their bonus. And MacArthur, General MacArthur, was the commanding there, and he actually fired on these veterans. So in World War II, he was not a well-liked general in the Pacific. But anyway, my father in the 30s sometimes got this bonus, and he had a friend that was on his subchaser that lived in Oregon. He used to go up and visit with, and this piece of property came up for a tax sale, and he had this little extra money, and he bought it. Mm-hmm. And it had some land that was suitable for cranberries, so he started cranberries, I think about 1938 or 40, before the war. Mm-hmm. And then since we've had it, we've expanded it quite a bit since then, and bought some other property too. So, right. So we get to go up and harvest this next few weeks.
And you're still living in San Canyon?
Still living right under that oak tree there.
And how many acres do you have now?
Oh, we only have this 10 acres here we've had, and then there's 10 acres here. That's all.
And what do you do with that 10 acres now?
Just I have permanent pasture here, and then we have sold off 3 lots right here. So there's 3 houses mm-hmm. here now mm-hmm. on this piece right here. But the rest of this is ours here and down here.
Now, you were telling me, too, at one point, and let me see what we got down in the picture over here. Well, it's almost in that picture. It's almost in one of these pictures. But the St. Francis Dam site, the reservoir behind it, you were telling me you ran cattle there, right?
Yeah.
What's that about?
Can't remember his name.
Mr. Brooks.
Ray Brooks, mm-hmm. who was the Dodge dealer.
Okay.
Dodge.
Yeah.
Down on Van Nuys Boulevard.
Okay.
He had a ranch in San Canyon, the head of San Canyon, and he was leasing and running cows over there. And something either happened to him or...
Well, maybe he didn't want it anymore.
Or didn't want it anymore. He told me about it, and so then I leased it from the city, it was the city of Los Angeles. I leased that from the city of Los Angeles and ran cattle over there.
Okay.
And had... an old German immigrant there that lived in a mobile home there and watched the cows. And of course, in those days, we didn't have any fences. Mm-hmm. And everything went along fine until the county decided to improve San Francisquito Road, and they made the road from there on up to the next powerhouse. Oh, and then they put that, we used to call it, alimony camp. You know, they used to put people in jail that didn't pay their alimony.
Okay.
Oh, road camp.
The county road camp, and they put a road through there. So then it was a question of have to put all fence along there or not, and I didn't know. We gave up the lease, but we leased it for quite a while.
Was that in the 50s also?
No,
probably in the 60s. Huh?
60s and 70s.
60s, yeah. So used to go up there on a daily basis almost.
Well, you talked about people that we knew in the canyon. We knew the Stones. In fact, we had children in their same class at school with the kids. Mm-hmm. Who else? Oh, and then we also had we've done quite a few movie locations.
Yeah, you've probably
the Lassie. Quite a few Lassie pictures in the probably 55, 1950, after 1955, we did Lassie pictures.
Rudd Weatherwax, who owned Lassie, lived right there, neighbor in the canyon. Mm-hmm. So when they looking for some ranch scene, well, we used to shoot. So if you've seen enough Lassies, you've probably seen our house or our farm.
What a way to go with Shirley MacLaine and...
Oh, yeah, that was shot there.
And the other gentleman that spent time over at the Hunter Ranch.
Oh, what was his name?
But we weren't home for that one.
Who was
anyway.
Remember he shot... Who was
Somebody asked him, told him where he was going. He says, yeah. He says, I know where I'm going. I spent a little time over there.
I've been to Saugus before.
Over
He knew where the Saugus was.
When Ruffles Had Ridges first came out, we did that commercial.
Mm-hmm. Well, I did a few commercials myself, too. I mean, I did that dog food commercial. I did.
First time we ever had insurance. We didn't have. You know, today everyone needs insurance. You know, they go panicky. Well, we didn't have insurance growing up either.
Even if you weren't in a union, if you'd worked for them, you had health insurance.
But that was the first time our experience with any. But fortunately, we didn't need any. But I mean, it's amazing too. I mean, we raised, had children without insurance. But of course, the children then cost $250, and today it costs $12,000 and $13,000 and $20,000. So something's wrong.
We just did another. We went home. We were at Harvest last year. What's the name of that? Bones. You ever hear of that on TV? They did a shot of our house there last time when we were gone. I haven't seen it. So, well, where'd you go up and get this piece of concrete right off the old dam site?
It came from there's, you drive up San Francisquito and you can still see the rubble off of the side of the road. And I would imagine that in 1960, all those memories of seeing it in 1928 came rushing back, huh?
Yeah. So.
Well, hey, we got to wrap it up, but what do you want to leave us with? If you were to, looking at, here we are in October of 2010, and yet people out there who've probably never been up San Francisquito Canyon, don't remember anything looking like that. No. What do you want to say to those people?
I think they should take a drive up and just take a look at the remains. You can still see the concrete there. You can see where it was without anybody telling you. The only other thing I'm going to say about Saugus or Newhall or Santa Clarita or whatever we call it anymore, since we've been here about 60 years, it has changed dramatically, especially in the number of cars and how much time I stay at red lights. We never had any signals, I don't think, did we? There wasn't even a signal on Sierra Highway and Soledad. In fact, one reason I knew something of this country before we ever moved out here. When I was in high school or less, my classmate Dick Cohn and then Bobby Cohn was a little younger. He got killed on the Astoria. When Frank Cohn used to have the
Saugus Cafe.
Their uncle used to be the judge here.
Judge McDougal?
Judge McDougal was their uncle. So even in high school, we used to come out here rabbit hunting. Yeah. And then that's the reason the Cohns moved out here. What still has the tire place.
So you've been in and out of this area a few times. Yeah, MaryLou, would you do it all over again?
Oh, without a doubt. But it's a very, very different lifestyle than people who live in the city.
Yeah.
Well, Gene, MaryLou, I want to thank you for joining us. And thank you for joining us for this edition of Legacy, Santa Clarita's Living History. I'm Leon Worden. Good night.